Welcome back. Thanks for enjoying the workshops and everything. Hope everyone had a good time. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Kyle McDonald, who's our next speaker. And I'm particularly interested in this because Kyle kind of demonstrates something we were just talking about in the policy discussion, which is how artists can influence technology. So Kyle will tell a lot more about his work, but let me just read a short bio. So Kyle crafts interactive installations, sneaky interventions, playful websites, workshops, and toolkits for other artists working with code. Exploring possibilities of new technology to understand how they affect society, to misuse them, and to build alternative futures. Aiming to share a laugh, spark curiosity, create confusion, and share spaces with magical vibes. Kyle McDonald.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Kyle McDonald, and I'm an artist from Los Angeles near the LA River, and I work with code. I know most people think of artists like this. For me, art takes a lot of different shapes. Sometimes it means building these mind-bending, immersive installations with disco balls and structured light from computer vision, tracking rare oceanic lights with Polynesian Voyagers, using the most sensitive low-light cameras on the planet, or organizing group therapy for artists affected by the NFT bubble, or working with AI from sound design to interaction design, from robotics to dance. And today I want to focus on this last thing about AI. And the majority of artists working with AI right now are making new kinds of images, mostly. But I'm interested in asking questions and building intuition through unusual experiences. I want to share some of those experiences with you today. But before I do, I want to provide a little context. I know we've been talking about AI for 2 days now, but I still want to give my version of like where this came from and what changed recently. What do we even mean when we say AI or machine learning? So artificial intelligence has a complex history that can be traced back to both the military and to early computational theorists. Arguably today, it means something like automation of non-physical labor. Machine learning is one approach to building artificial intelligence, and deep learning is a kind of machine learning that uses neural networks. If I want to automate something with a computer, sometimes I can just write a simple program that will explain kind of how to do it. I'll explain how to do it step by step with instructions. We call that code. And machine learning is a little different because you program with examples of what you want to happen instead of providing instructions. So I like to say machine learning is just programming with examples, not instructions. And deep learning is the version of machine learning that has taken off in the last, let's say, 10 years or so. It's powered by two basic ingredients. There are these really simple functions called neurons that are chained together, one after another in big groups. And there's an algorithm called backpropagation that tunes those neuron functions until they match some data that you've given them. And this approach to training neural networks was invented a while ago in 1970, but it was popularized by this researcher, Geoff Hinton, in 1986. And he was basically shunned by academia and conferences and journals for decades because no one thought neural networks would ever be useful. But then in the 2000s, there were these big changes that brought neural nets into the mainstream. And researchers like Geoff Hinton literally conspired to rebrand neural networks as deep learning. Like they sat down and they made that decision together. And then the changes that kind of allowed that to flourish were sort of threefold. So there was the data, the algorithms, and the hardware. The rise of social media and surveillance capitalism meant that companies like Google and Facebook had access to way more data than ever before. And deep learning was the only way to really effectively put it to use. So the algorithms evolved as well, even in really fundamental ways. They added simple functions to the output of those neurons, or they would randomly multiply neurons by 0 during training and kind of make it hard for the network to learn. And it turned out that made it more robust in what it learned. And these small changes had huge impacts on the efficiency and the accuracy of the learning. And then in terms of hardware, in the late 2000s, researchers started using graphics cards, which are also called graphics processing units, or GPUs, to train their networks. And the speed difference was so big that it meant they could train more complex networks for longer and get more accurate results from the data. So there was this moment that kind of caught everyone's attention in 2012 in the machine learning research community, where this really small team of researchers won this ImageNet challenge using neural networks for the first time. So the task of this challenge was to predict the name of an object in a photo from 1,000 different possibilities. You know, if it's a photo of a leopard, you want to say it's a leopard and not a jaguar or a cheetah. And after years of older machine learning algorithms being applied to this problem, this new team suddenly won by a landslide with an error rate that was half of their competitors. And guess who co-authored that paper? It was Geoffrey Hinton. He finally got his revenge. One of the most important ingredients in their solution, and in all of the image-based work up to the present, is something called convolution. And so convolution means finding the overlap between a chunk of data and a sliding filter, which is called a kernel. This is an example of a one-dimensional convolution. So in this case, the blue line is our data, and the red kernel is kind of sliding across it, and then the yellow overlapping area creates this black line, which is the output of the convolution. This is just a moving weighted average where the kernel is describing these weights. And you can do this in 2 dimensions as well with images. So this means finding the overlap between like the pixels of a small kernel and a big input image. And depending on the pixels in the kernel, the output could be a blurred version of the input or a version where the edges are highlighted or something else. So another way to think about this is that the output will highlight things in the image that look like the kernel. So if the kernel is a horizontal line, then the output will highlight horizontal lines. And when convolutions are used inside neural networks, they're called convolutional neural networks. Convolutional nets apply different convolutions, one after another, in multiple layers. And they're simultaneously learning basically 2 things. One is image patches that help discern categories and what combinations of these patches make up a category. A category is something like leopard. First, the network learns to detect things like edges and spots, and then a combination of like an edge and a spot might make like an eyebrow and an eye. And then finally, the net will recognize that when you've got an eyebrow and an eye and a nose, that must mean it's a face. And sometimes it's hard to untangle exactly what's going on behind the scenes inside these networks. You know, what is a feature and what's a combination of features. But if you want to understand this better, there's this great video from Jason Yoshinsky where he walks through like basically what's going on inside a convolutional network that's looking at images. What are they seeing? In retrospect, it really shouldn't be so surprising that these networks would succeed, because they were already in use in the late 90s for automatically reading handwritten digits on checks and mail. And recent developments in generative imagery are also based on these convolutions. So it's not just the category prediction, kind of image classification stuff. These complex filters on an image can downsample it to a category, but they can also be upsampled kind of from a category. You can take a category and kind of make an image out of it and filter it until you get to something that looks like what you asked for. These image generators didn't appear overnight, though. So some of the first hints were back in June of 2015. Has anyone seen this picture before? Okay, wow, okay, that's interesting. So this was a kind of psychedelic technique called deep dream. The idea is to basically take what a classifier sees, classification network sees, and then make small adjustments to the image to increase the probability of it seeing that thing. So if a classifier sees a dog in like this region of the picture, then it will modify the pixels a little bit to make it more dog-like. If it sees like, you know, some kind of building, it'll make it look more building-like. And after enough iterations, we're left with this monstrosity. This was the first deep dream image that kind of went viral, and it was leaked by someone at Google to Reddit. And I actually just learned yesterday, even though this is colloquially known as the puppy slug, I learned that this was saved in a file called trippysquirrel7.jpg. Deep Dream's incredibly beautiful from a theoretical perspective because it's one of the first techniques to really show us what was happening inside a convolutional network. Using Deep Dream to visualize specific objects like lifting weights, it becomes really clear that the network hasn't learned how to separate the object from the context of the hand that's lifting it. And besides showing us what was happening inside a network, we can also think of this as one of the first text-to-image generators. Another popular direction around that time was the style transfer technique, which was announced in August of 2015. Helena Sarin is an artist who mixes style transfer with her own drawings and paintings. And both Deep Dream and style transfer are not really machine learning algorithms per se, but they both use a trained neural network that has come to understand how image classification works. They use that to augment images. Pix2Pix was another algorithm around that time, 2017, that operates on a completely different principle. So it takes image pairs and it learns how to convert from one image type to another image type using a convolutional network. And new versions of this technique are still used today for neural photo filtering and all other kinds of applications. So before Deep Dream or style transfer, there was this algorithm called char-RNN by Andrei Karpathy in May 2015. And it was, in some sense, it was like the first chat GPT. He basically trained a small language model, not a large language model, a small language model on Wikipedia, and it would generate text like, naturalism and decision for the majority of Arab countries capitalized was grounded by the Irish language by John Clare, an imperial Japanese revolt. So it was really surprising to see this at the time, even though it's completely nonsensical, because it still felt a little bit like reading Wikipedia. And he trained it on code too, and it would generate, arcane comments that came from the Linux source code and everything. It would, say the kernel blank will coeld it to user space. And if you know how to write code, like this is weirdly reasonable, even if it doesn't make sense. So this wasn't the first generative text. There's a lot of earlier examples of generative text and poetry, and even physical machines that generated text. But it was a kind of breakthrough in complexity, where these were, I think, the first hints that something big was about to happen. And there were artists like Ross Goodwin who was doing deep experimentation with these algorithms from day one. So Andre, in the last slide, who made char-RNN, he actually finished his PhD right after publishing that, and then he joined OpenAI, which had just been founded, and then 4 years later, they announced GPT-2, and if people weren't paying attention before, they were once GPT-2 was released. The results were kind of scary good for the first time. And the main point I wanted to make just from sharing some of this history was that artists have been quite early to a lot of these technical breakthroughs that have diffused more broadly into culture in the last couple years. And this tech I don't think this is going away, but the path ahead will always be all of ours to discover and to figure out where we want it to go. And a part of our job as creative people is to help define it. Whether that means imagining a future with it or pushing back against it. So I want to take a kind of pointillistic approach and speak about a bunch of AI-powered projects that I've worked on. And I'm going to roughly group them into 3 categories. There's the AI tech no one talks about, a quick case study on face analysis, and what questions does AI help us ask. For me, there's another idea that's a lot more exciting than generators, like image generators, text generators, and it's about automating similarity. Machine learning doesn't need to answer a specific question necessarily. You don't have to determine what category an image is or what the sentiment of a Yelp review is. We don't have to do those things. Machine learning can do a lot of other things, like it can provide a softer, more intuitive analysis. This is a screenshot from an algorithm called UMAP, which is running on a data set of handwritten digits called MNIST. And UMAP will basically take a big data set and lay out every data point in space, so that similar points are really close together and dissimilar points are farther apart. In this case, the data set of handwritten digits is a collection of really tiny images, 28 by 28 pixels per image, which is 784 numbers. And UMAP, one way you can think of it is that it reduces those 784 dimensions, all those pixels, to 2 dimensions, like a point in a 2D space. Algorithms like UMAP are called dimensionality reduction algorithms for that reason. And UMAP can suggest a shape to a data set that sometimes is hard to see from just kind of scrolling through the individual data points and looking at them, or even other types of visualization. UMAP can give you a lot of insight into kind of what the vibe of the data set is. For example, if we use tiny images of fashion items, then all the high heels form a cluster at the bottom right with the boots at the top left. I don't know if I can, these are the boots up here. These are the high heels down here. And they're kind of related to each other and blend and blur into each other. The first time I explored dimensionality reduction was in the context of short drum samples. And I was thinking about new ways to explore large sound data sets for composition and improvisation. So I converted a bunch of samples into tiny images called spectrograms, and then I organized them using dimensionality reduction.
Welcome. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Dimensionality reduction doesn't give you a single definitive answer. There are a lot of different ways to organize a data set. It's more of a starting point for other kinds of exploratory analysis. And I showed this experiment to a friend, Alexander Chen, who just moved to the countryside in New England, and he was turning into a bird watcher. So he asked, what would happen if we tried to do dimensionality reduction on bird sounds and bird calls? And we can snap these spectrograms to a grid to navigate them more easily. That same machine learning technique I used for the sounds can also be applied to other media, like images. So there's this researcher in Japan, Itsuo Sakane, who has spent decades documenting media arts events around the world. And he has this unparalleled collection of hundreds of hours of video that have just recently been digitized. So I worked with this Japanese art studio, Rhizomatics, and we extracted high-level features from the videos using a neural network that was trained to classify them, but we took kind of the internal state of the neural network, not the classification. So we didn't ask, what is this object, and then grouped it by what the objects are. We took the kind of thing that the network was thinking about what the object was before it gave us the answer, and we used that to kind of organize them by similarity. So abstract concepts like green background or blue sky, circular objects, eye shapes, feathery textures, they each get kind of grouped together in their own little cluster. Laying out images or sounds in a big collection isn't always helpful. So sometimes when machine learning provides a similarity metric, another approach to working with that is to build a search tool. And I worked with the Studio for Creative Inquiry at Carnegie Mellon, and we built a search by similar image tool for satellite imagery, which is designed to help the public find patterns of interest in democratized geospatial intelligence. And it's really ideal for locating infrastructure that isn't usually indicated on maps. For example, when you click on a container yard, then it will show you all the other container yards. Or when you click on a pier, it will show you all the other piers. Or it works just the same for cul-de-sacs and sand traps and power lines and tennis courts. And as humans, when we see something remarkable, we make a mark on the map. But for the neural network, everything's remarkable. I've explored this kind of machine learning powered similarity approach in the context of humpback whale songs most recently with a composer, Annie Lewandowski. Humpbacks have this really complex cultural musical repertoire that has a kind of hierarchical structure to the songs, really similar to classical music. And it can take hours of listening to humpback songs until you can start to internalize that structure and how it works. So we built a tool for analyzing humpback songs and running dimensionality reduction in a way that makes the structure a little easier to hear without listening to hours of music. So then we convert this visualization to lighting design in the context of a large installation that draws attention to all of the kind of dangers that are faced by ocean life, which is mainly leftover fishing gear. All right, let's do a quick case study. I want to speak about face analysis briefly because it's the domain that I've spent the most time engaged with in my art practice that's connected to machine learning and computer vision. So I think I have some ideas for kind of general strategies for creative people, like if you want to be kind of potentially engaged with dangerous technologies. So I've been thinking about computer vision and faces for about 15 years, and I helped invent face swapping 12 years ago with artist and engineer Arturo Castro. In our everyday life, face analysis feels mostly benign, right? It helps us unlock our phone, and it makes, gives us cute photo filters. Actually, I just want to share this one because I really love this video. This is like my favorite face swapping video ever. But face analysis algorithms, they are dangerous. Any tool that attempts to predict an identity or orientation from a face for the purpose of deploying systems that make large-scale automated judgments, like that's a dangerous thing. For example, this infamous research from Koshinsky, where they trained this neural network to predict sexual orientation from a picture of a face. So they used profile photos from a dating website. They combined that with data about the profile's gender and the gender of the person that they were seeking. And then they found that the model worked really well in the context of the data that they had. And then they used that result to make really questionable connections between sexual orientation and biological factors like testosterone levels. Other researchers are attempting to predict whether someone is a criminal based on their appearance. One of these rows is criminal faces, and the other is non-criminal faces. So who thinks the top row is criminal faces? Okay, who thinks the bottom row is criminal faces? Oh, wow, it's pretty clearly the top row. So it turns out the top is criminal, and the bottom is non-criminal. But I've asked different crowds this question, and it's not really consistent. Different people have different ideas. It seems kind of funny to me that the non-criminals have a kind of gray background, and the criminals have like a more white background. So I guess if you just wear like a really big gray hoodie, then you're okay. Other researchers have been rating, how attractive someone is based on their appearance. And for me, this really hammers what's wrong with this situation. We're all really good at kind of making snap judgments at each other about how attractive we think other people look, right? And we often agree with each other, oh yeah, that person is or isn't so attractive, right? But I don't think this is necessarily like a good feature of humanity. I don't want to bake this into an AI just because estimating attractiveness could be described as a behavior that requires intelligence. That doesn't mean we should just go ahead and automate it. We should spend a little time thinking about what parts of our humanity we actually want to automate. Some of these papers are more speculative, and others are aimed at real immediate utility. So this paper claims to predict whether someone is Uyghur, which right now the Chinese state is actively deploying surveillance of Uyghur people in Xinjiang and detaining over 1 million Uyghur people in re-education camps. So what do? Do we just go out and protest until we get policies changed and legislation passed? Well, maybe, but just hope that the cops aren't deploying anti-disguise face recognition, and hope that they aren't flying drones with violent individual identification. I want to propose 4 alternative strategies for responding to potentially dangerous machine learning technology. So first, maybe you can find something genuinely useful, even if it's a dangerous technology. And we should explore and encourage those uses. So one example is I've been working with the Studio for Creative Inquiry to analyze the work of Teenie Harris, who's a newspaper photographer from Pittsburgh. He documented his community from the 30s through the 70s in Pittsburgh, and the Carnegie Museum of Art has called his 70,000 photo collection one of the most detailed and intimate records of the Black urban experience known today. So I helped analyze and sort these photos in a way that was kind of like intuitive and playful for people who are newcomers so that they could explore it easily, and really helpful for curators and archivists who are working with his images. He didn't keep notes about his photographs, so there's a lot of questions that are left. And one of our main efforts was helping archivists identify who is actually in these photos, because a lot of these people are still living or have, still living relatives. And cross-referencing hundreds of thousands of faces is actually best accomplished with automatic face recognition. That's a really good starting point for answering some of those questions. And actually working with face recognition in this way can feel really healing and refreshing to know that there are applications of this technology in the cultural heritage space, for example, where it is a genuinely useful tool for accomplishing things that we've been trying to do in a much harder, slower, more complicated way for a long time. We also explored a lot of different interface ideas for presenting these collections in intuitive ways. And this work is now accessible to the public at the Carnegie Museum of Art. So you can, if you visit Pittsburgh, stop by the museum and you can kind of go in and explore Teenie Harris's archive and all the different people that are in there and this stories that are kind of collected through that archive. Okay, another strategy is to just manifest the future so we can kind of collectively gain some experience in the present. This is an installation called Vibe Check that I built with my frequent collaborator, Lauren Lee McCarthy, and we deployed 10 cameras throughout a space like a gallery or a museum, and then we track how people feel in that space based on their facial expressions, and then we guess who it is in the space that is making them feel that way by tracking who they're spending time with. And then we display those people on a leaderboard. We say, this person makes us feel surprised, or this person makes us feel sad. And a lot of, yeah. So we imagine this world where, maybe what would happen like in the real world if we did the same kind of community policing that we do online, for example. And maybe if we actually build this out with real face recognition, real face expression analysis, we can give the audience a chance to build an intuition about what it feels like to live in that world, whether we want it or not, how terrible it feels or how interesting there are certain parts of it, but kind of like in a safe space where once you leave the gallery, you are not going to run into that again. And Lauren and I really like to build, real versions of these experiences, not just speculation, but, to really build out everything the same way that we would if we were a startup or a tech company. And it really helps us build insight about the challenges of building those kinds of systems, and it better informs our perspective on how to effectively critique them. Okay, a third strategy, which is to just invert the power dynamic. So this is ICE Spy, which is it's a website I built that runs face recognition across the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement employees. I wanted to respond to claims that Microsoft had been providing face recognition software to this US government agency, which has repeatedly been shown to violently abuse its power. So I used a database of headshots that were scraped from LinkedIn, people who work for ICE. And then I also used Microsoft's own face recognition API to help you find the identity of ICE employees. And it also demonstrates, when you take a picture of yourself, presumably you're not an ICE employee, and it shows you the fascinating ways that tech can fail. And strangely enough, after 5 years online, as of this last month, Microsoft finally disabled small-scale public access to their face recognition services, and the website doesn't work anymore. But it worked for 5 years. Now they only provide face recognition to really big companies. Okay, a fourth strategy is to just kind of democratize the means of resistance. I Spy was kind of fun, and it was cathartic for me to feel like I could do something that was like a bit of a thorn in their side when I was feeling really frustrated with kind of my own inability to have any impact on that level of governance. And but it sort of falls into this old trope of like the singular media artist as activist who's like pushing it back against the powers that be. And ultimately, like it's pretty historically clear that any individual act of pushing back in that way is ultimately just going to be co-opted and turned into like a better defense system by those powers that be. So as an individual creative person, I don't really think that you can invent something simple that like fundamentally disrupts power. Maybe there's something, maybe I'm just not creative enough yet. I mean, Signal's pretty good, but it's doesn't really work that way. They're eventually gonna find a way to like flip it upside down and turn it into like a funny face filter. But I do see hope in the possibility of like spreading resistance more broadly, like across everybody. And so this project, Facework, is a game that basically gives players a chance to interrogate face analysis algorithms in real time and to build intuition that we wouldn't have otherwise. Because typically when a surveillance system makes a judgment about you, it's doing this behind the scenes. You never get to see its kind of thought process or respond to it or have a feeling for what it's doing. You don't get to engage with it in real time. And it's only when you can make immediate real-time relationship with these algorithms, that's when you can actually build the intuition for them. So I built a face attribute classification system from the ground up using popular face analysis algorithms and data sets. And I asked the players to just kind of fool with it in real time. And I'm just going to show you quickly. Let's see if I've got anything scary here. Okay. I'm just going to show you what this looks like. So we start, and it says, okay, get started with your first job. It's a food delivery. So we need you to smile. This is kind of like a future gig economy. You've got to, make sure that you can play the part. So I come in here, and I'm like, okay, all right. Oh, God, I got to smile. Did I get 95? Yeah, there we go. Hold it. Okay, all right, great. Whew. It says friendly delivery. Their smile was the perfect appetizer. Facework took a $1.25 fee, so I didn't get my whole tip, but I got $1, so I'm happy. All right, let's see what other jobs we've got here. Now we've got wearing mask. We could be a babysitter and keep our eyes open. We have to dental training, keep our mouth wide open. Wearing lipstick, we can be a prank companion. Let's do the mask one and see if we can get away with that. So already it thinks I'm kind of wearing something. Maybe I can do this. There we go. That's a mask. Really nice mask there. All right, solid. All right. We have been absolutely overwhelmed in the ER, and a couple extra hands always help. This face worker came prepared. So you basically just go through these jobs and start to realize, like, wow, this stuff does not work. Like, I ran this algorithm on the data set that the researchers use, and I used the model that they use, and I got the same, oh, and then it gets interesting. I'm not going to give it away. I got the same results that they got. I have like a high accuracy on the data set, right? But once you have literally 10 seconds to interrogate any of these in real time, you're like, this does not work at all. I can just put my hand over my face and it thinks it's a mask. Yeah, I think that strategy, maybe I'm getting more excited about that, of just letting everyone kind of come in and be like, wow, this doesn't work and I know how to break it. Okay, stepping away from face analysis, let's finish with a couple questions that I think AI can help us ask. I want to look at some kind of broader questions. So this is another project with Lauren Lee McCarthy called Unlearning Language, and we used AI to help us ask the question, what does it mean to be human? Unlearning Language is both an interactive installation and a performance that uses machine learning to kind of provoke us to find new understandings of language that are undetectable to algorithms. The piece begins with this one-act play for 4 performers. Each performer who is kind of taking the role of one piece of a future AI. And they ask the audience, you know, what does it mean to be human? And they reminisce about the days past when they were unable to understand humans. You know, before we started changing our voices and gestures, you know, modifying our accent when we speak to Siri so that Siri understands us correctly, holding our phone in just the right way so that our phone can make sense of our gestures and voice. They're kind of like longing for the uninterpretable, the thing that is so different from what they are now. And they ask us to perform for them in a way that they would never understand. That's the beginning of the piece. And then once the performance is over, the audience is basically invited to sign up for some time inside this installation. And it takes groups of up to 8 people, and the room kind of acts as the AI. So it guides the visitors through all these questions and kind of encourages them, and they get feedback from vibrating devices in their seats and from flashing lights and from speakers, and their faces are analyzed for facial expressions, their body language is analyzed for common gestures, and their speech is recognized. We're basically running like everything that we know how to do to understand people. We run all of it, and if we understand it, if the AI understands it, we'll tell them, no, like I understand that, try something else, you know? Try and communicate some other way. And by the end of the experience, people are like on their chairs upside down, and they're like quacking at each other in order to answer questions. This was also the first time that Lauren and I used the GPT-3 API from OpenAI in an installation. And this was a few months before ChatGPT came out. And we could kind of feel the strangeness for the first time of having our feet kind of like in both worlds, like looking back from this imaginary future while also like barely stepping into this real future that felt like everything was just about to change. And we're pushing some of these ideas from unlearning language in the next piece that we're about to show at the IDFA Doc Lab in about a month in Amsterdam for a piece called Voice in My Head. And we're using the AI to ask, can we become a new person by giving up control? Voice in My Head, it's essentially a replacement for your internal monologue. So as the visitor, you wear a single AirPod, and after your short onboarding session, where it asks you, what do you wish the voice in your head sounded like? It instantly clones your voice, and it starts listening to all your conversations, and then once a minute, it starts providing feedback on the conversation with exactly the tone that you asked for in your voice. And it's a really strange experience, and I can't wait for some folks in Amsterdam to see it. We were asking some kind of similar questions using a simpler AI in an earlier work called People Keeper, where we explored the possibility of machine intelligence controlling every aspect of your social life.
We only have so much emotional bandwidth.
Bring it in.
And limited time.
Mustafa?
Our social circles are widening.
We don't know. That's bad.
All those relationships
Anything in general that makes you excited.
can be overwhelming. there's an app. People Keeper tracks your physical and emotional response while you're hanging out, and it analyzes the data to identify who stresses you out and makes you excited, sad, or happy. See how your relationships stack up, and let People Keeper find the ones that work for you. It'll automatically manage your relationships, so you don't have to. Scheduling time with people that make you feel good, and blocking the ones that don't. Forget fake friends, failed romance, and FOMO. Optimize your social life with People Keeper.
So this was a real app. Like, you could download it, you could get you could run it by itself, or you could pair it with the band, which tracked your heart rate variability and stress levels. And it really did just take over and start sending people messages and organizing dates and things. And from the App Store, I think a few thousand people actually tried it. Yeah. I've also been asking this question about giving up control with this earlier piece called Blind Self-Portrait with Matt Metz. So the visitor sits down, they hold pen to paper, and when they close their eyes, the machine starts drawing using the visitor's own hand. And you, as the human kind of in the loop, your role is completely minimized. You're just a tool in a larger apparatus that is controlling you. And when I talk to people who are afraid about like some future artificial superintelligence, I always come back to this piece and I think about how it feels when your eyes are closed and your hands getting moved around. And I remember that there's this kind of calm, reassuring quality to it. It's like a, massage, or like you're being guided in a way that's really comforting. You don't have to make any more decisions. Everything's going to be okay. You're part of a system, and you don't have to work, but work is still getting done. But there's also this really disturbing quality, obviously, where you constantly feel like you want to break away and assert your free will and take control again. And I think when we worry about this like future, with AI, a lot of what we're worrying about is kind of power and free will, self-determination, our own intentionality, our ability to our desire to want to be less and be more at the same time. And I don't know where it's going yet. I want to finish with one last question, which is, when is human authorship essential? So I've been asking myself this for years in the context of music and AI, because every time a new generative musical tool comes out, it gets closer to generating the kind of music that's been most meaningful to me. I'll type something in there that I hope will sound like my favorite artist growing up, for example, and I'll get the result out, and it will be closer and closer. And I start to wonder, if I heard any of the songs that I love the most, but they were generated by an AI, would I still love them the same way? Or does there need to be a real person behind it for me to connect with? And recently I realized I've just been thinking about this question all completely the wrong way. Some of the primary users, like I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, some of the primary users of generative AI are people who have some kind of creative vision, but they don't have the skills for producing culturally legible work. They can describe the image that they want with words, or they can make a rough sketch, or they know it when they see it, but they don't have the kind of experience to produce it from scratch. And in the context of music, that's me, basically. I haven't been through the extensive practice that would allow me to easily compose the kind of piano music, for example, that I love the most. So I found this old model built by Google in 2018 called Music Transformer, which it's sort of unloved. They never really released it in a way that has an easy interface. So it took me 4 days just to get it to run on my computer. But once I got it to run, it just started spitting out tons of music. And it's a lot like GPT-3, but for piano. So it can be initialized with a short snippet, and it will continue to improvise a whole song. Or you can just ask it to generate something completely new randomly from scratch without any input. And so I wanted to write a short piano piece for my partner, Olive Komodo. So I asked Music Transformer to generate thousands of compositions, and then I sorted and filtered and listened to a bunch of them until eventually I found one that I transcribed and kind of modified and developed until it was what I wanted. So I want to play a snippet of a quick recording that Olive made, playing her interpretation of this piece. One of the things I learned using Music Transformer and working on this song with Olive, and it's really obvious in retrospect, but the meaning of the work is not tied to how it was generated. The meaning comes from who cares about it. I think from us working together on this, I realized that's where the meaning came from. It doesn't matter that probably 90% of this came from an AI built by Google, because the meaning happened when we worked on it together. In closing, I hope you can walk away from this presentation knowing that art has a lot more to offer beyond the automation of skilled creative labor provided by generative tools. But even there, we have a reason to be optimistic about the way that they can create a fulfilling cultural legibility for people who are creative but inexperienced. Dank u wel.
So, nice. So we'll take a few questions if you have for Kyle. So yeah, come on, back up. Any questions? I have one.
Yeah.
So how do you define artist in this context?
That's a great question, because the thing is, being an artist overlaps with so many other things. You know, I am solving technical challenges, sometimes in the same way engineers do. I am sometimes doing design to like make something work in a way that is, let's say, pleasing or accessible, or solving those other kind of design problems. I think the thing that separates being an artist for me from a lot of that other stuff is it's about the question asking. It's about like presenting questions to people, and especially, I mean, you heard me say it a bunch, but building intuition. I think having an experience that helps you gain some kind of direct knowledge of something that doesn't come from, journalists telling you, here's how things work. It doesn't come from a scientist telling you, here's what I measured. It comes from you having a direct experience that helps you either connect with someone else or with yourself. That's the art part for me. And it does overlap a lot with design, but I think, I think it's reductive, but I tend to think, as the artist says, maybe if the designers are maybe solving problems, the artists are creating problems. That's one way I think about it, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Any questions? So it seems like a lot of your work is playing with data. And it seemed like, especially in the piece with the whale songs, there was a kind of embodied data visualization, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, what's visualization good for? I guess it's good for helping you get closer to the thing that's being visualized. And in the context of the natural world, when it comes to humpbacks, for example, I guess I've just been learning that it's hard to get abstractly closer. You have to get closer with your body, and like you have to feel it. You can, like, I don't know. On that project, we worked with someone who had previously helped release this album in the 70s called Songs of the Humpback Whale, Katie Payne, and she basically went to the Caribbean and worked with a Navy engineer to release a full LP of humpback songs, and it was really the first time that the public kind of became broadly aware that humpbacks sing songs. It wasn't. I mean, maybe you remember. I don't know, but people didn't know that humpbacks sang songs at some point in the 70s before this album came out. There was just maybe some fishermen and some indigenous people who were aware. And at that moment, the humpback population was at 10% of its pre-whaling population. It had been completely decimated due to overhunting. And after that album came out, it was literally like 1 decade, 2 decades, until a bunch of UN policies kind of got adopted by a number of nations. And today, humpbacks are back at 90% of their pre-whaling population. It was like a few decade turnaround on something that was really about to be the end of humpbacks. And it was literally just the sound. It was like people feeling it in their body and being like, oh my God, I feel that, I relate to that. So I think that certain kinds of change don't really happen unless we feel it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Ask again. Yes, question here.
I have a question about maybe how you, it has a bit to do with the copyright thing. I guess that the more your career advanced, more of your work is also in databases somehow. And how do you feel, for example, that maybe some of the face swap images are now in a database that might train a new algorithm, and kind of that loop, how it's, if you go on with your work, that might happen for the coming like 10, 20 years. Yeah, it's not really a question, but a perspective, I guess.
Thanks for that question. I don't want to say I'm not interested in copyright, but I'm more interested in artists and our sustainability, our economic viability, our like lived experience. I think copyright has been a tool to kind of help artists and creative people for a long time, but I don't know that it's the best or the right tool, and it seems like it's really obvious now that it's creating some complex problems where it's not being respected in the way that it should, and like in places like Japan, they're literally legally allowed to build these models without breaking copyright. Like you can build a big image generator model in Japan and it's completely legal. It doesn't break copyright. That's not going to work for artists long term, especially for anybody who is like, you know, their livelihood as an illustrator or a graphic designer is threatened by automation of these practices. So as concerning and complex and interesting as copyright is, I would much rather focus on like, how do we make sure that artists can survive? How can we make sure designers survive? How do we build up economic infrastructure that allows that to happen? And I don't know if it's going to come from, you know, some people have proposed things like opt-in or opt-out models, or maybe if you make an NFT of the thing, then you get a certain amount of royalties every time it like gets used indirectly. And I don't know if any of that stuff will work. It's too, I can't see like a legal precedent for that happening. So I would love to step back a little bit, and I want to see more people figure out policy around, you know, like getting more public funding to artists, getting more public funding to designers, and increasing that at the same rate that generative models are taking off. Something like that feels more right to me. Yeah, thank you.
Peter? We get a mic back there.
Thank you.
Hi, Carl. Thanks. Really enjoyed the talk. Thank you. Very interesting. I noticed that pretty much every project is a collaboration with someone. I wondered, well, two things. I wondered if you could just describe your collaboration process, how that happens, and you know, the actual dialogue that you go through with someone, and what do humans give you that AIs don't?
I love that question. I think people who don't tell you that projects are collaborations are probably lying. I think pretty much every project's some kind of collaboration. You know, not everyone cites all of their influences and everyone who helped them make something. You know, I put like, I do that sometimes too. You know, I showed Facework here and I didn't show anybody else, but there were 3 other people I was working with. It was just that I had the final say on what was and wasn't made because I was the one that got funding to do it. I think one of the reasons a lot of my work has been collaborative is connected to the way that arts funding works, and you know, it's a lot easier to get multiple people to have equal say in something than it is to have one person and then hire other people, because you cannot pay people enough to do whatever you want them to do from arts funding. You all have to have some say in it. For me, I also just love that process. You know, I got into media art through the open source software scene through open frameworks and processing. I was really exposed the first time at Ars Electronica to like kind of the broader community of media artists, and I just saw everyone working naturally with each other all the time, people sharing their expertise. It wasn't something that I actively thought about doing, it just was the way that it worked. And now I can see like, oh yeah, you're right, everyone is a collaboration. But yeah, I think that just happens pretty naturally for me. I like to, I think that's where new ideas come from, and that's where some of the most interesting work comes from, is when you have lots of different influences. Yeah, what was the second half of the question again?
What do humans give you that AI doesn't?
Yeah, they have a perspective. You know, if you ask ChatGPT a question, it doesn't have a perspective. It has a kind of homogenized representation of the collective conscious, right? You can ask it to have a perspective, but then it's just your perspective you've asked it to have. It's not really something you can break or like figure out. You can't even tell it, come up with a perspective and do that thing, because it will tell you what its perspective is, and now the kind of curtain has been lost. And I think the thing that humans give me is the impossibility of ever truly knowing someone else deeply, you know? And with ChatGPT, we know it. It's just everything. Like, we already know that about it. So I'm interested in working with people that I will never really understand.
Other questions? Dirk.
So we're a design school and an engineering school, and you've got this great background across engineering and arts and design. Thinking about the future of design education, I'm curious how you think the arts or art practice might infuse design education. Is there anything you'd like to see, or anything that you think would be useful in engineering school design education?
I don't know that I can have a great answer for that. I taught at NYU for 6 years at ITP, and I have my own experience of like what worked in that context, but it was a very specific environment. And I can say what worked for me there was basically lots of hands-on stuff, lots of discussion, and really like getting students to get deep and like get their hands messy with stuff, instead of taking this kind of superficial, like we're going to, you know, only read and reflect on things, which is important for other, you know, applications. But I think if you're trying to do this really cross-disciplinary thing, you have to get your hands messy. So yeah, that's my biggest suggestion. Figure out how to write code and get everyone to be banging their head against their computer with each other. Yeah.
I think there was another question here.
Hi, thank you for the great presentation. Really enjoy it.
Thank you.
My question is more about the facial recognition one. Are there any kind of policy in place, let's say, to prevent this kind of thing to be used, let's say, in recruitment process? Let's say because you can cluster types of face that's really good for sales.
Yeah.
Because it's much easier to quantify face than charisma, right? And businesses are looking for minimizing cost and maximizing certainty. It might lead to discriminatory hiring practice, like for sales, actor or actress, news anchor. Are there any kind of policies that are already in place for?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. And it's a really complicated answer, because the basic answer is yes, but it varies drastically from, you know, jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So within the EU, there are a lot more protections than throughout the US. But within the US, you have certain regions, like certain states, that have laws against collecting certain kind of biometric data. And then you have other regions that have laws against using that biometric data to make certain kinds of judgments, like you just said. There's nothing that anyone's agreed on yet. And most places are pretty unprotected from any of those kinds of abuses. Two people that would be interesting to look into who have done more artwork about this and thought more about the policy side is Paulo Chirio and Adam Harvey. And they've both gotten really deep into, you know, what the different policies are where and how we can kind of change them most effectively. But I'll say just from the face analysis research I've done, 2 examples that have been most disturbing to me. One is I found, I almost put it in here, but I found a paper recently that was done by researchers for a consulting for an insurance company, where the insurance company is not technically allowed to change their rates based on your kind of health reports, but they built a model that predicts how obese you are from a photo. And technically that is okay. So what's even more disturbing is the data set they used for predicting how obese you are is based on a data set of about 20,000 inmates in a Florida jail that they got headshots from. And apparently that's okay because the Florida jail sold the data to them. Yeah, this is just normal stuff in the face analysis world. It's just happening right now, and especially in the US, it's not nice. There's another example I was going to give of, actually, let's just leave it there. Sorry, it just got me off track. But yeah, there's a lot of examples like that, and you should look into like specific jurisdiction that you're concerned about and like what step can be used to kind of move forward a little bit.
Take one more question. Stefan?
In relation to what you just said, do you see a cultural difference, how your work is being received in the US versus Europe or elsewhere?
100%, yes. In Europe, people can really easily look at this and say, oh my God, that's so dystopian, what an interesting critical artwork. In the US, I very often get the question, so do you think you're gonna like develop that further into a startup? Or that would work really well on Shark Tank. Well, actually, this one, I forget where it was exactly, but this one, People Keeper, we got invited to Shark Tank for this. We got halfway through the process, and then they realized at some point, wait a second. So yes, a huge difference. And I don't know what fixes that. I mean, so much of this is so deeply tongue-in-cheek in the way that it's critical, and I don't know if you can, I don't know if you can overcome the kind of tech solutionism that exists in the States. Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks.
Kyle, do you want to take your computer? Sorry. Or you can give it to me.
So we're going to reset now for what we've called a town hall meeting. And we're going to change the stage very quickly while I'm talking. And what we want here is we want to hear voices, and we want to hear what's happening from all of you as a community. And we've structured this with the idea that we'll hear a bit back from the unconference, and we might also ask you what you think we should be talking about here that we're not. What have we missed? And what we might want from the symposium in the future, what you would like to see more of. But just before we do that, it might be nice to get you practiced at talking. So just while we put some chairs on the stage, I might invite you to talk to the person sitting next to you, or behind you, or on the other side of you, just so that you start talking, because we've been sitting here listening for a long time, and we're all a bit stunned. Let's come back to where we are right now.
Yeah. And what have you noticed? Chat about what you've noticed at the symposium these last couple days.
Hello, hello. Sorry. I'm going to very rudely interrupt you all right in the middle of your conversation so that you're sitting there with words ready to come out of your mouth in a minute when we call on you. But just before that, I'm going to bring up Derek, or stay down there, whatever you would like, just to tell us a bit about what's happened at the conference through the voices of the people who were there.
Yeah, wonderful. So we had a great time. It went really well, and we've got a few people that have some takeaways that they'd like to share. Would anyone like to share? Great. So I'm going to go around and start handing things out.
Yeah, so what we discussed at the unconference, one of the things we discussed was how the role of the designer might change. We thought about how ChatGPT might help with future visioning, for example. And it really shows that at first we were really good at visualizing stuff, for example. But we also saw how easy it is to do the whole process or do it with generative AI. And we had a bit of a discussion whether the role of designer might shift from creative to more of a facilitator and translator. So yeah, that was a really interesting outcome of the workshop.
Great, thanks. Let's hear another voice.
Great. I just hate silence. I think there were, of course, different rounds of talks, but in a few of the rounds we also discussed how to define AI. Is it a tool? Is it our goal? Is it something as a mirror was used a lot, that it reflects on what we're already knowing and thinking? And I think that was really interesting because we didn't come up with the answers, but just questioning that what is it and how do we use it came up in a lot of the talks.
Yeah, we had 9 sessions, by the way, that we organized right before we held them. And one of the things I'd encourage is having more bottom-up events like this. It's really easy to run, it's really easy to organize or disorganize, as the case may be. Any other comments from...
In the back.
In the back. Ah, great, wonderful.
Yeah, I think one of the things we discussed was, using the power that AI can bring to bridge the gap between individual actions and global impact. What do I mean with that? I mean that if you infuse a large language model with values that we care about and use it maybe to develop some kind of value compass that you can have as you work on projects, that really is something that you could use to get into like a kind of a value-driven artificial intelligence collaboration, really go back and forth between your ideas, the direction of your project, and this AI that just talks to you about, hey, at this point, are you really working with this value in mind, or are you being in conflict with it? So that's something that we discussed, and I think that was pretty interesting. And the other thing that we discussed was that there are these grander, these bigger skills that we humans have a lot of difficulty making sense of. So, for example, ecology, or how the complexity of nature, which machine learning models certainly would be capable of making sense of. So using the capabilities of machine learning models in this way to really have maybe the Earth as a stakeholder, or create this ecological intelligence that currently is very difficult to make sense of. And I think, I don't recall the name of the person that said it, but it was really well put, was these truths that we all agree on, like, for example, world peace or sustainability, but that we never seem to achieve, because everyone wants world peace, everyone wants sustainability, but we're just not getting there. And that AI could be able to help us make sense of it, really balance all these stakeholders. So it's a very long answer here, but that's what I took out of the discussion session.
Thank you, Francois. Yeah, I'll just say we had a session on image generating AI, practical uses of GPT in design, AI and UX UI design, ethics in AI, AI and creativity, AI and data visualization, AI trend analysis and futuring, AI for social good, and AI and sustainable design. So I'm sure there are a lot of other topics that you'd like to talk about. I think being able to hear more about what people are using and what problems they're encountering is part of what we can bring to bear as designers. We tend to be good at listening to people, or in any case, that's our job. Any other comments before I pass off for the town hall? Yeah, one more.
Yeah, initially, because I'm a designer, so drawing this kind of talk, I think it sometimes made me confused because I'm not really good with programming or something. But after this unconference, that made me more clear. I found that a lot of different majors colleagues were also confused about AI, and we are still thinking about the role of AI. For example, the first part we are discussing with AI and creativity, but I found that at last we talk about human creativity instead of AI creativity. And we thought that, wow, if AI try to create a lot of for us, so what's the human creativity? Maybe AI would be a tool, not the creativity itself. And also, when we talk about AI and the user experience, we also talk about how should they input for AI instead of how should they service for us. So I think most of us would really care about how should we collaborate with AI instead of AI itself. So I think it's a meaningful topic. And I think after 2 days, it makes me more clear than step by step. Yeah.
Well said. Thank you very much. We had a great time.
Thank you for running it.
Just a quick question. Do you have plans for documenting what came out of this, and so we could post it on the website, say?
Yeah, we've extensively documented the sessions, and we've put them into ChatGPT, so I'll send you the 34 pages of that for the website.
All right. How will I credit it? What's the copyright? All right.
And I want to pick up a quick question. There's something Kyle said that really resonates with me around, we're not programming with code anymore, we're programming by providing examples. And to me, that's one of those paradigm shifts about how we think about what we're doing technologically. I'm putting that next to something Eric Gu, is Eric still here? No, he's run away. Said, you want to do the creative thing you're trying to do, and the language model just wants to finish the sentence. Because it was coming up with completely impossible things that it ought to be doing, because that's its task. And I thought I'd throw those two things out there to see if anyone's come across anything in the last day and a half that has made you go, yes, that's a slightly different way for me to think about the world. So I'm seeing if we have anything that's stuck with you and resonated with you about our relations with AI.
Anyone?
I think we haven't got people talking enough.
Okay.
I'm going to fill the space just for a second to see if any hands go up. Anything bubbling away? Yes, we've got one. Wonderful.
So I create some applications using AI API. That's like hundreds of them all over the place. And after this workshop, actually from the yesterday's workshop, I discovered a new way how to make a better application of AI that's prioritized more on love. That's the yesterday's workshop, and that's an ethical. I think that's a more ethical, easier way to make an ethical AI application. I think that's what I learned.
Lovely, thank you. Any more out there? Little nuggets to share. We've got one up on the stairs, and we're going to bring your own down in a minute to tell us how we're going to change policy. So let's give him a microphone.
I think one outcome which was very indeed interesting is actually also the democratization of creativity. That AI, and especially if we make AI tools available to the public, this will really enable many more people actually to become creatives as well and produce content. So also therefore creating a spark probably in their creativity and in their lives as well. So actually AI can bring or unlock a lot of potential of people actually by means of the tools. So that not that it's taking away creativity. So that's actually also quite a positive outcome, I think.
Thank you. And unless another hand goes up, that might be a really nice moment to invite you down, because you were going to tell us a bit about how we're going to change policy collectively, right? So you had a workshop about creative industries, AI policy. What happened in there?
Actually, it was a very nice workshop. So thanks for all the participants to it. We and also as well for Leon and Elina preparing the workshop. We took an approach actually, which was actually also throughout the whole Design and AI Symposium, being like the dystopian world and the utopian world with AI. Nicely, a lot of things came together, what we have heard over the last 2 days. This created a number of needs, actually, which for both the culture and creative industries, but as well the AI developers, as well policy makers. So we tried to turn these needs into what policies that eventually should be developed for the CCIs by the European Commission. We have put this in canvases. So using the so-called OPSI model, which is a model being used by policymakers, like having long-term, like more radical innovations, or short-term or incremental ones, top-down or bottom-up initiatives. And actually what I found striking, actually, that related to the CCIs, we are probably the best ideas are more on the short term. So we already see that actually, based on the current state of knowledge and the rapid developments currently with AI, actually already on a relatively short term, actually the culture and creative industries can benefit from this, but as well should adapt to it. And actually therefore can also do it themselves. Actually there's a lot of opportunity for bottom-up initiatives, actually from the sector itself to take these opportunities. And especially this has to do also with skills development. So that's actually, as a sector, but as well as a group and community over here, like having these events and debating it actually is a very important way to make people aware about it and to like what the opportunities are. So I definitely would love to further create the outreach of this. Also in Dutch Design Week. And like through ChatGPT, but that's I think definitely something which we could work on. But as well, for example, in making indeed tools available to our sector, so to help them in relatively easy to use tools, to use data, and to come with outcomes, and also to share it within the community, so to learn from that. I think the longer term perspectives, so like how the world probably will be radicalized by AI, and what new missions we would like to go to, and how government should focus on them. If I look through my eyebrows, then actually it's interesting thing that there's a certain protectionism in it. So then we see that actually the government should maybe control things, so that it's indeed ethical, so that also the industries are being protected by it, so that we take into account privacy, for example. But as well, an important thing which also came out was intellectual property. Several. But as well, that intellectual property is both an opportunity and also a threat here. So I think this is also a big need, actually, even maybe for an AI tool on intellectual property and how to deal with it, because also it's you can really get headaches of that, and a lot of work needs to be done. So actually, this could be a solution, and as well, like for having opportunities with AI. Supporting in creation of policies on this. So AI, therefore, I see that there are a lot of opportunities actually for it, but both like short term, but on the longer term, then probably also policymakers can have a bigger role itself from that perspective, top down.
When I first heard, when I first heard of the project, I was thrown off a little bit by policy, the term policy. Maybe it's just my American perspective, but maybe you could say a little more about what that really means.
So the project is initiated by the European Commission, as they are actually investing quite a lot currently already in the cultural and creative industries. And probably also should explain what the European Commission means by the cultural and creative industries, because that was also not completely clear for everybody. So that's indeed both the creative professionals, so being designers here, like here in the room, but as well architects, filmmakers, like musicians, but as well the performing arts, but as well advertisement agencies, gaming industry, maybe website creators, etc. So it's actually creating, but as well like more the performing arts sector, as well literature is also an important one also to mention here. European Commission is currently already investing 3 billion euros in innovation for this sector, and actually is also considering this sector as like the unique selling point for Europe. I think with definitely the diversity in languages we have in Europe, the history, the cultural heritage which is there, the different cultures, is really unique to have this on such a relatively small area, so much content actually available. And it's also a very substantial sector already, because it's more than 5% of the GDP is being created by the cultural and creative industries. It's larger than the automotive industries, which probably in the world is much more known as being an important sector, but the CCIs is even bigger. And it has the highest growth rate, so it's really a super interesting sector. So the Commission is very much into further investing into it, but of course the money is scarce, so it has to be put in the good things. And therefore the Equipe project has been really asked to really help the Commission with where are the most urgent challenges, the most important challenges, where should we put our money in. And definitely with AI, it's one of the 15 themes which will be topics which will be advice will be created on. It's definitely one which will have big impact on the CCIs, both for maybe their role will change, which we will have seen over the last days, but as well the opportunities which are there. So definitely with the input that's being created today, we will bring this further with policymakers in Brussels in December.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And it's interesting to see those moments where we might get to shape things on a larger scale, and we look up from what we're doing to think about the context they happen in. And we maybe ask questions about why in such a large industry, it's also some of the people with the most precarious jobs and the most challenging places to find work. Yeah, but I don't think we need to open that up much more right now. I think people are probably reaching the end of their energy for listening and engaging. But I wanted to just do a quick scan around and see, is there anything that we haven't talked about that we should talk about? Just to put that out there as a question, is there anything that's been missing from the discourse? And we saw some of this on the first day with people saying, oh, it's so easy to critique. Where's the support for all the wonderful things that we can do? And I think we've somewhat addressed that, and I think we've seen a lot of the wonderful things that we can do with AI. Are there any other bits that we're missing that we should have engaged with?
I think practicing designers have a lot to share right now. I mean, as they discover these tools, and so, I think just knowing more about how professionals are using the tools to make work happen.
Great. Any more?
Maybe specifically something on the climate view on what AI does, because I think now it feels like AI is just a system that does all these things. We can critique it, but there's actually very visible climate impact. And it could have, but maybe for the next year.
Yeah, and we saw that come through in a lot of the talks, but we didn't have a specific way to sit and collectively think about AI and sustainability and climate. Yeah. There's another one right next to you.
Adding to this with the climate, I think, because for me, how I perceive this event.
Hold the mic a little closer.
Okay. How I perceive this event is that we're still thinking very self-centered. Still, these technologies for us, our own pursuit of our own dreams and how we can play with it. I do think we're missing the more collective or more expanding more to the social good impact we can actually do with this and how we're going to use all these data. Because we were debating what is good, what is bad, based on who is judging and who has the power and who has the funds to actually run this. So how can we actually collect data and use it as a compass, as a basis? For example, with the planet, with the climate, can be a way that the planet communicates with us. How are the levels, what is going on, and not waiting to be reacting to as we've been doing so far, but actually being proactive to do it, like learn from our mistakes, and actually we have the power right now to actually think of this and envision a better future. So I think more towards the real world, the real world, or more real people, what is going on, what impact can we have in the rest and beyond us.
Lovely, thank you. Nothing I can add to that or reframe in any way. We've got one more at the back.
Yeah, what I would love to have next year or in future symposiums would be maybe people from industry, having a perspective from the industry. This year I think it was missing a little bit, especially with regards to, maybe inviting people, designers that are working within AI companies or AI industry, and understanding how they actually work or implement ways of working or collaborating in order to, ensure, all the good, attitudes and the goodness of design that we all share here. I think that would be great.
Great, yeah. It's often tricky spanning the academic and the industrial, and we did try and get some more people in. It's hard work sometimes, but definitely taking that on board. And that switched nicely into what would we like to see more of here? Any other desires or requests? Things that might be good to get in here?
I think if I can add policymakers.
Policymakers.
Yeah.
I think as well, like definitely on the theme of AI, is it's moving that fast. Also, they need and rely also on these communities actually for having input and to debate what the community wants and thinks what should happen. So we definitely invite policymakers. So.
Great, love it.
Yeah.
Any more? We've got 1, 2.
Yes, I have something. I think next to, I don't think I missed it, but now with all the information I got today, I think I would like to have like a path or a direction of tools or trends that could help me as professional to be more efficient, to work with this development. Because now I don't think, of course I have played with Midjourney and all the tools that are out there, but there's still so many questions of how to use them effective in my day-to-day work, and how to do that of a path or direction could be helpful.
Great, yeah, so something more practical. We've got a question, we've got a point up there, and we've got one more at the back somewhere.
Getting a workout.
I often think about the situations in the world, Israel at the moment, or Ukraine, and what happens if technology fails, if there's no electricity or stuff like that. So I think we often think about how AI can control or manipulate us, but we are also getting more and more dependent on it. And I'm missing, as designers, how we think about fallbacks and how you can, if your car is not driving itself anymore, how you can take back the steering wheel.
That's a lovely point, and it plays into some of the questions about education as well, as of what are the things that we need to keep doing as humans and keep track of. So, you know, if a self-driving car goes wrong now and you've learnt to drive, then you have a chance to write things, but if you've never learnt to drive, then it's going to be totally different. So I think that's really good things to be thinking about.
Sort of AI literacy, kind of.
Lovely. I think maybe that's a good moment to wrap it up. What do you think? Yes. So,
time to drink.
Thank you all for your attention and your presence and your willingness and your curiosity. I hope we've discovered a somewhat bright future together, despite all the criticality. What's Willem? I'm getting a rectangle, and yes, we have to thank really a lot of people, don't we? We didn't plan this.
We didn't.
Have you planned this?
No. Fortunately, security did.
Great. So who do we need to thank? Do you have a list? Are we busking? We're busking a list together.
Yes.
Sorry about this. Right. So we know that we have to thank all of our keynote speakers, who've been absolutely fantastic. I'm not sure how many are still here. I mean, Kyle's still here because we haven't let him run away. I know Shalini had to go.
Yep.
Stefan's still here. I think Elsia ran earlier on. Yep. So thank you so much to our keynote speakers.
And I want to thank Sukriti and Lenny and all of our student volunteers for making it all go smoothly.
And we have to thank our panelists from yesterday, but I think all of them have sublimed. I can't see any of them here. Nope. But thank you in absentia. And we need to thank everyone who ran a workshop and who gave a talk and who provided a demo to keep us all excited about possibilities today.
And our technical crew.
And our
nice work.
Have we missed anyone?
Probably.
Almost certainly. And then finally, thank you all for attending and being here today.
Yep.
Phil and Dave, of course, for organizing this.
Thank you.
And now there are drinks over there.
And we hope to see you next year in Eindhoven.